Hi everyone, my name's Gary Symons. I'm the CEO and founder of Vericorder Technology. We're all here to learn a little bit more about the new technology that's being brought into grassroots news, and including the editing suite that our company developed, the website that it's integrated into, and then some of the management in the background. We're going to start out learning mostly about the editing suite. A lot of you will be field reporters or training field reporters, so the morning will be spent on that. Now, we'll be bringing this up on the monitor here, and I'm going to be demonstrating this on the iPad version. You all have the iPhone version. They're very similar. There's a few differences that I'll go through as we do the lesson, but the core techniques are pretty much the same. The biggest differences are that there's more tracks on the iPad version and a couple of bells and whistles, and there's a few differences in the buttons. I'll explain each one of those as we go through it. But the workflow is essentially exactly the same in both. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our home screen, and I'll take you right from the beginning. The version you have, you'll see a screen that includes a recorder, like an audio recorder there, and you also have a video recorder, and finally you have your folder. So I'm just going to hold that up for you. So I think everybody knows how to do the video recording. It's basically on-off, but I will mention one thing about it. When you do a recording with this program, we felt that file management was important. So you can do a whole bunch of recordings in a row as opposed to the Apple camera. And so if I hit recording here and then stop and do another recording and then stop, when I actually press the button to insert it into, like in other words, to save it, you'll see that I can give it a name. The name will be the same for every single file that's created, and then they will be numbered in sequence. So for example, if I do something called forest fire, then the files will be forest fire 1, forest fire 2, forest fire 3. So it's important to realize that when you go into a scene, you don't have to do one shot, stop it, save it. The best way to do a story is, and to keep all your file management simple, go in, take all the footage you need, and then save it, and then you've got one file name. So when you go back into your projects, you know exactly what to look for. So in this case, I'll just, for example, call those fire. The audio recorder works exactly the same way. I wanted to show you one thing about the video recorder as well. You'll see that when you bring it up, there's a very small flag on one side. That's track marking. So if you're doing an interview, sometimes we call that the gotcha button. So when I worked in the Parliamentary Bureau in Ottawa for a while, we'd interview politicians, and whenever they said something blindingly stupid, we would push that button so we could find it easily later. So basically, that just helps you keep track of the clips that you want. Try not to overuse that button. Sometimes every time someone starts speaking, they push the button. I usually, when they get to the end of a clip and I think, yes, good clip, I push the button, but I try to keep it to 2 or 3 good clips out of, say, a 20-minute interview. When you go into the editor, you'll be able to just simply tab through and right to the spots that you want. So it's a lot easier to do a quick edit. So that's about all I wanted to go through on that. On this one here, oh, actually one more thing about the front page. You'll also see a file folder button, and that will take you to something similar to this. This one is a lot more graphically oriented because the screen is bigger, but you'll see on your phones, you'll see a list of all the files. And there's different kinds of files. Basically, you can see audio files, images, video, and you can also see projects. And projects are essentially, the edit decision list. It will bring up the project at the latest stage of its development. So if you've gone halfway through a news story and you had to close your app, you go to project, as long as you've saved the project. And if I open this, for example, you'll see that this will bring up a project that I'd already done. and it will save whatever I've done last. So, you know, basically every time I leave this project, I'm going to save it. So, for example, I'll hit the home button. This one will save it automatically. Yours will give you a prompt. If you've made any change at all, it will say, do you want to save the project? And usually the answer is yes. So that takes you through the front screen. So I'm going to go first of all into projects and how the actual editing interface works. So perhaps I'll start with a video project. I can give it a name, and I'll just call this one Lesson. Usually what I do is I give my project the same name as I give the files that are going to go into the project. So if I've done forest fire, then I'll call it forest fire. So on your phone, the big difference between what you're seeing up on this screen and what you see on your phone is that there are more tracks. So these two top ones are video, and that's the same on the iPhone or the iPad. Below that, all of the tracks are audio. You have 2 tracks of audio and you have 2 tracks of video. It's worth noting though that even though you're editing on a video track, you can also edit the audio on that track as well. And we call that associated audio. So I'm just going to open up a little piece of video here. And drop it into that slot. Now you'll see when I want to work in audio, I can push either one of the audio buttons and I will now see audio. So now I can work in audio. So basically the upshot is that you really have 4 audio tracks and 2 video tracks. Now I'm just going to get rid of that for now. One of the things that's different about this editing system than editing systems that most people are used to, and really is because of the size of your screen, is that we have something called a build screen. And so I'm going to go through how I might build a project, and you'll see why we use this. So when I do a TV story, often if I've sat down, I've written a script, then I'm normally going to do my audio first, you know, because that's the actual story. So I might put in, you know, and usually in a voicer situation, it's going to be my own voice with B-roll on, and everybody's familiar with B-roll. So, and for people that watch this later, I'll explain that B-roll are images of what the story is about, and they usually go over the voice of the reporter. So normally what I would do is I might drop in some of my own voice, and maybe I'll just grab a piece of random audio. So let's say, for example, that I talk for 10 seconds, and then I have a second clip. I drop it in for 10 seconds, and I have a third clip of myself, which would probably be my sign-off. I drop it in. As you can see, I now have 3 clips. I can also change the order of those clips if I want to. So you can see here that all 3 clips have appeared in the timeline editor. And the reason I usually start with audio is that as I start building my story, I basically know that I may have 2 clips to put in here, right? The audio then has to be covered by B-roll. So as you can see, there are 2 tracks of video. And the first one here, I call the A-roll track. So that's where I would put the clips of the interviewee. So if I interview someone, that's where that's going to go. Or if I do my stand-up, that's also going to go there. And the reason I do that is because this is actually a passive track. The top one, just like in Final Cut, whatever is the top track is the dominant track. It will automatically switch to play the top track. So I'm just going to drop some B-roll, and that will always be in the top track. So maybe I'll just take this. I'll just take a couple of, oh, and by the way, because I know that I have to cover 10 seconds, all I have to do is pull in 10 seconds of video. And let's see here, that one. And I'm going to go through this a lot slower so that you have a pretty good idea how it works. There we go. So as you can see, I've now covered my audio. It may not be precisely there, or I may actually want it to go a little bit longer. And if I want to do that, I can just pull here. But as you can see, I now have B-roll on top. So if I play that, so that part is pretty simple. So then, once I get through that, now I want to drop a clip. So when I drop a clip, I'm going to drop it on this track. So I would just put my cursor where I want to drop that clip. So in this case, right about here where my voice ends. Maybe give it a slight bit of breathing room. And I'm going to hit that plus button. And I'll take this fella right here. Now, again, I'll go through this slower, but what I often do, once you get used to editing, you kind of know where things are by sight. You get a lot faster. A lot of times what you'll do is you'll actually hit play, and you'll go through and you'll listen to the whole interview and make notes and think, okay, what's the best clip? Oh, I'm not getting sound for some reason. Ah, there we are.
We are a sales, traffic, and billing system provider. Typically in this business, it's very fragmented.
So I can see while I'm going through this when he's talking and when he's not. I know roughly that he started around here with the clip that I want, and so I would put my in cursor there.
We are a sales, traffic, and
move it until I get about the right spot.
And tell me a bit about what your company does.
We are a...
So roughly in there, right?
We are a sales, traffic, and...
So then I just play through until I get to the end of the clip. But
we are a sales, traffic, and billing system.
If I wanted to go faster, what I can do is I can simply, I'll probably just zoom this out a bit, make it easier. I can watch him talk, and when he stops talking, I know probably that's the end of the clip. There he is. So for now, I'm just going to do a rough estimate and drop it. And so now I have B-roll and going into a clip, right? So I'm going to bring that back here and just play it, see how it looks.
So I'll call in, and we haven't had a decent Skype connection.
We are a sales, traffic, and billing system provider.
That's about as hard as it is to sort of do that kind of B-roll going into a clip. So that's the basic process. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of slow down quite a bit and show you step by step how you use the different tools and what those tools are. But this is the basic workflow. You know, I usually drop my audio first because I've written my story. I'm going to cover the audio with B-roll, and then I drop a clip. And I usually create all my clips in the build screen first, and then put them into the fine editor. So now, to go back, I'm going to get rid of this project. I'm going to say no. So every project starts by, on yours, it'll just say at the bottom of your screen, it'll say new project. And you just have to hit that. So, note about the build screen first. That's where every project starts. And on yours, it actually brings up, whenever you hit the plus button along the bottom, it's going to bring up that build screen. Because we have a larger screen here, we actually can put it on the same screen. We don't need to flip back and forth between the screens. On your iPhone, you'll see that you will only see that build screen there. And the reason that we did this is somewhat similar to the bin system in Avid, but easier to use. You know, where in Avid you drag your files into a bin and then you can drag them into the timeline one by one. This actually creates little blocks of audio or video, and then you simply drag them in order. Now, to do that, I wanted to show you some things that throw a lot of people when they're working with an iPhone. And this is really about learning how to use two things, highlighting and the cursor. And if you practice anything after this, I would spend a lot of time practicing just these two things, how to highlight something, and then how to move the cursors. So the first thing we're going to do is, and if you want to bring out your phone and give it a try, once you get this screen, just tap in the middle twice. So 2 little quick taps. So that's basically called a double tap. Pretty familiar iPhone gesture, right? So now that will highlight, whether in this screen or in the fine editor, it's actually going to highlight the entire clip, one clip. So I now know that I've highlighted everything from front to back. Now, when I want to actually create a clip and isolate something within this, I have to put in an in marker and an out marker. So to move the in marker, what I do is I touch the top, as you can see, and this is very important. I don't try to actually grab the cursor. So you will see that I actually touch away from the cursor, and the cursor will jump to my finger. The reason I do that is because within the iPhone framework, the actual OS, there are certain things that happen. If you touch something for a certain period of time, that's one kind of command. If you touch it for a less amount of time, it's a different kind of command. So what I've seen a lot of times is people try to grab that cursor and move, and you'll see it didn't move because I didn't leave my finger there long enough. Once I touch here and the cursor jumps to my finger, I know I have control of the cursor. I can then pull my finger down anywhere, as long as I leave my finger on the screen, and I can move the cursor. So I'm going to put it right here. And then to get the out marker, you touch the bottom of the timeline. So that's the right one. So again, I didn't try to find the cursor, which often is off screen anyways. I just touch the bottom, it jumps to my finger, and now I have control of that one. I set my in and my out. So I'm going to go through a couple of the commands here. Once I've highlighted something, I can play it. Things will always play from the cursor. Now you see all these buttons down here? Every one that has an arrow pointing up has more than one command. So I'm going to go through the commands really quickly. So there's play. I can play this selection. I can play around the cursor, and I can play the actual block that I just selected if it's an audio block. So one reason, for example, that we have play selection, I may just want to play that little bit. And that is, that's actually the default. So if you just press it once, it'll do that. But the reason we have the play around is that, let's say, for example, I've set my in marker, but now I want to set my out marker, and I'm not sure exactly where it should be. If I'm doing a 20-second clip, I don't want to play the whole clip. So what I do is I hold this down, and I hit around.
You can record it, you can record your voiceover, you can pause.
It plays 2 seconds before and 2 seconds after. So if you're isolating a 20-second clip, all you have to do is go play around the cursor. It will play the end cursor. If there's one cursor, it will play around the one cursor. So that's when you set your in marker. So is that clear? Okay. So the other one that's really important and acts a little differently than you might expect, especially if you're a long-time iPhone user, is zoom. So a lot of people will zoom like this. They'll do the typical 2-finger pinch, right? And does everybody know the 2-finger pinch gesture? Yeah. So once I put my fingers there, you'll see actually circles appear. We did that partly because people who are not used to the iPhone will actually try to do this too fast. They'll do that and nothing happens. So when you see those circles appear, it means you've got control, and then you can zoom. So that's one way to zoom, traditional pinch. Another way to pinch, to do this, is these commands here, and these actually work a lot better. There's 2 commands that you'll use all the time. So the first one is, I'm going to just highlight this. I'm going to zoom to selection. This shows me all of my clip, and it'll get more important. The longer your piece is, the more important that is. Secondly, so let's say, for example, that I'm working on a very small piece of audio, like this, and I'm going to zoom to selection. Well, now I can do really nice fine editing, and this is especially important when I'm doing things like doing a volume curve or something like that. Now, I finish my work in here, then I go to zoom to fit. So all the time when I work in a project, I zoom to selection, to do tight work, and then I zoom back out so I can see the project. So the next one over is just undo and redo. So undo's by default, but I can also redo. This goes back to start, but it will also go to the previous track mark or the next track mark, or it will also go to the end. So it's just a quick way to navigate through the screen. This one, if I create a block and I want to get rid of it, this one will get rid of the block. This one will just trash everything. This one is usually used if I'm doing video and if I want to crop a photo or something like that. And then finally, let's say I've created this clip. If I want to add a second clip from somewhere else, I can go in here, and to keep on adding from different sources, I just keep on adding. You'll notice when I do this that each block is a different color. And the reason we do that is that if it comes from a new video or audio source, it will be a different color. So you'll know, for example, perhaps you did 3 interview clips. You'll know by the color that those are the 3 interview clips. From the B-roll, you'll know that those are B-roll. So it's just a color code that says, I'm this kind of clip or I'm that kind of clip. Finally, we have save. So you can actually save right from here. So if all you wanted to do was create apps and send that into your admin, this is how you do that. So I can save all of the blocks and then later on just send them. So that's a very quick way to just take a whole bunch of clips, save them, and then you send, and you're done. Again, you can save a single block if you want, and that will be whichever block is selected, which in this case, as you can see, is number 4. And then finally, you can save a selection. So that would just be the selection here. Finally, I can hit that to get out of this. In other words, that won't put anything into the timeline editor. And finally, I hit that check mark, and it inserts everything into the timeline. So the build screen is really where, if you want to think of it this way, this is where I create my clips, and this, the fine editor, is where I actually do my fine editing, craft my story, move things around, that kind of thing. So do you have any actually, we'll do questions later, but is it fairly clear what we do with the build screen? Okay. All right, so again, I'll go just quickly through these tracks. Top one is B-roll. The second one is the A-roll, so it's interview clips and your stand-up. And then we have, in your case, 2 tracks, and that's all I'll use in this case. So normally what I do is, if I'm going to put my voice in, I put that in on the 3rd track. In other words, the top audio track. That's always where I put my voice over. You've got a couple of options there. You can simply pick a clip. So you might want to write your script and then record everything. So record the whole thing. The other option you have is you can record right into the track. So again, you'll see that arrow there, which means there's an option. So I can record straight into my track from here. And I get this window. The window on here is a little bit different than what you're used to. On this one, I can actually read my script. So if I've written a script, it's going to be here. And then all I have to do, so for example, I could type that in. But once I've read my script, I hit stop. It'll give me a name so I can save it later. Again, I would give it the same name, forest fire something. And usually everybody has their own file naming protocol, but it's important to have one. So normally what I do is I put in, if it's forest fire, I could put in forest fire VC, which means voice, my voiceover. So, my protocol is forest fire voiceover, so forest fire VC. If I'm doing background sound, it's forest fire BG. If I'm inserting a sound effect, like say a chainsaw, I'm going to call it forest fire chainsaw SFX. So I have a certain coding that I do, but everything has to be tagged back to the original story so that I can find it later and put it together. So that's how you record directly into the track. You'll also notice, and I'll do it again, when I record into the track, I have a timer. So I may know, for example, that I have about 15 seconds to fill between one clip and another clip. So I can just go on here, when I get to 15 seconds, 13, 14, 15, stop, I know that I filled exactly the right amount of time. So it's important to pay attention to your timeline and actually how much room you have. So, now the tools on here I'll go through quickly. I think we've got about 5 minutes before the break. We have play, and basically the same set of selections, except you can also do a full screen play, and you can just play the audio if you want. Plus, you'll go back to the build screen and add more clips. This one is actually extremely useful. You often put, especially with B-roll, you'll often put your B-roll in, but not in the right order. So you may go, you know what, I actually wanted 3 before 2. It makes more logical sense. All I have to do is go in here, and I can drop those 2. I can also drop them to different tracks, right? So it's just a really simple way. Rather than having to go in and find a big chunk, delete it, delete something, then move that chunk over here, you just switch them back and forth. Whatever change you make here will appear here. Again, you've got the undo redo button, you've got the zoom, the go to start button. A couple of the new ones you have in here is that you now have fine audio control. So there's 2 audio controls. The one that looks like a V that you see on the screen there, that's the same one on your iPhone, is volume curve. I'll do that fairly quickly. I'll do it slower later. When I do volume curve, what it does is it lets me do a nice rounded curve so my sound comes up gradually or fades out gradually. So to do that, you hit the button. You'll see toggles on the right and left hand side. What I want to do is I want to set my cursors where I want the fade to happen. So in this case, I'm going to do a 5-second fade from the beginning. This is again why it's really important to use that double tap to highlight everything. If I do a double tap, I know with certainty that my cursor will be right at the beginning and right at the end. So if I do a fade at the beginning, all I have to do is move the right cursor here, and I know the other one's exactly in the right spot. If it's not in the right spot, the fade won't happen. So all I need to do is I move these toggles, and I now have a fade. Again, you'll see that there's a little arrow there. And so I can actually take a number of different options here. I can do a linear fade, which is what that one is. I can do a concave up, or I can do a concave down. And that will change how the sound comes in. This one will make it come in more abruptly. This one will make it come in more gradually, right? So that's basically how that works. If I only have 1 point, then it will just move 1 point. You can also delete a point. So wherever that cursor is, so if this cursor is on that point, I can go in here and I can delete that point. Now the other one, again, I'm going to highlight the whole clip. I use that double tap pretty much constantly. That is the one gesture that you use 95% of the time. So I'm going to double tap. Again, there's 2 toggles. Now this is your mixer. So this is where you can increase or decrease the gain. And what's going to happen here is if I use the one on the left, and I'll go to zoom to fit. So now you can see all of them. If I use this one, it will reduce the volume throughout the track. All of them change, right? So if all of your stuff needs to be boosted or whatever, then you can do that. On the other hand, if I just want to change one clip, then identify that one clip, highlight it with a double tap, and then I bring that up. And so now I can see that they're all about the same volume. Very simple way to match your volume throughout your piece. Now, the only other thing here is the script writer. So we have a script writer where you can play your piece and you can write at the same time.
You can record it, record your voice over.
So I can write here. Later on, if I want to send that story to the station, all I have to do is select all, and then when I actually send, there's a part where you put your story, and then I paste, it drops into the script, and then basically you send it. So it will send your headline, your script, and all your video, and post it automatically to the website. So this is where you actually do your script. The nice thing about it is, I'm going to turn it down a bit, that was quite loud. The nice thing about it is that I can review, and I can also control the playback. So if it gets ahead of me, all I have to do is hit the back button, and it goes back about 5 seconds. So when I transcribe a clip, I usually use a wireless keyboard, a Bluetooth keyboard, connect it to my iPhone, I write my script, and then when the person starts talking faster than I can type, I just hit the back button. So I type for a bit, I hit the back button, I type some more, I hit the back button until I finish transcribing. And then finally, there's a help button. So I won't be here tomorrow, so if you need training videos, you can go here and get training videos. You know, you can go through the entire manual, and pretty much anything that you need to do will be in this manual. That's pretty much all the controls. The last one, of course, is home, which we've used before. And again, if I close my project and I want to save it, I've got to hit yes. And you know, if you don't, that's a bad day. So we should be pretty much wrapping up here. I might just go through these quickly if we have time. On the bottom, this one is a create new project. This corresponds to what you have on yours. This is doing video recording, audio recording, but later on we're going to get into this one here. This is where you can import from your photo library or your music library. So if you've done something in another program, you can import it from there. And this is where you can actually do, oh, I've got to get my Wi-Fi started, but I can actually wirelessly transfer all of my files either into another iPhone, iPad, or iOS device, or into any computer wirelessly. And that's how, I'll show you that a little bit later. The next one, of course, is background tasks. Anything that's going on, like for example, if I'm importing something, I can see how long it's going to take, or if I'm sending a story to the station, this is where I see that. This is settings, and you can do a lot of different changes in here. You can also change some of your destinations. And finally, again, you have direct access to the help. So that should pretty much wrap up this first section. We'll get into some more of the actual editing in fine editing screen in the next segment.